before I start talking about what I think is an exciting new project that we've got happening in the UK in beef genomics, I'll start a little bit about the beef industry in the UK. This slide here shows that we have a lot of breeds in the UK that are used for beef production. And you'll notice that there's even some black and white breeds there. We've got quite a large influence of dairy. However, although we've got a lot of breeds, the top 7 breeds make up 94% of the slaughter population. So there's a lot of breeds that are very minor. Darren Todd, one of our PhD students, last year published a paper looking at the genes in the slaughter population and found that Holstein and Friesians had the most proportion in the slaughter population. Our next most popular breeds are the continental breeds, so Charolais and Limousin. And Limousin is the biggest beef breed in the UK. A lot of talks have said how Angus is the most popular breed in other countries. That's not the case in the UK. It's quite down the list at number 5 and a lot smaller in frequency. For the rest of this talk, I'm going to talk about Limousins because they're the largest breed in the UK and because that's who our partner is in the project. To provide some more background, I'll talk a bit about the carcass traits as they currently exist in the UK. E-genes provide the genetic evaluations on behalf of Signet, and we do this by multi-trait analysis within breed, and we produce traditional BLUP EBVs. For carcass traits, we do this for proxy traits at the moment. And if we take a look at the Limousin example, in the pedigree sector, they register approximately 20,000 animals a year. And the traits that we analyse for them are 400-day weight, and about 25% of animals are recorded for that. And we also use ultrasound fat and muscle depth as a proxy trait for the carcass conformation and fat. And about 7.5% of the pedigree animals are measured for that. So that's what our current evaluations are. It's within breed and within the pedigree sector. Oh, I should say also that our commercial producers, they don't talk in ultrasound muscle depth and fat depths. They still talk in the Europe grade system because that's what they get paid on. Moving towards the future, it would be nice if we could actually have some actual carcass traits that we evaluate. It'd be nice to have more animals recorded because it's actually a small number when you're looking at the pedigree system. And we'd like to incorporate new technologies, and the one I'm talking about today is genomic breeding values. And by doing this, it'd be nice to have better market signals in the thing so that the seed stock producer and the commercial producer are all talking the same language. We've heard a lot about in this conference how collaboration is required internationally, but to do this, collaboration is actually required inside the country as well to join up the sectors. So this brings me on to the project that I'm talking about. It's a 3-year project that we just started in November. And it's a collaboration between the Anglo beef processors, which are one of the largest processor plants in the UK, and the British Limousin Cattle Society, which is the largest beef breed in the UK, and SAC, of course. It's funded by Technology Strategy Board, and basically our aim is to deliver to the industry genomic breeding values for video image analysis carcass traits. Not only will we do that, though, it'll be the first time in the UK that genomic breeding values will be available, and so it'll also provide a platform for future genomics works and for the other breeds. So a little bit about VIA. If those were in the Thierry's talk, this might sound familiar. ABP are installing into their abattoirs the E+V VIA system. And basically how that works is that there's a carcass that is positioned over the blue holding frame that you can see in the picture, and that moves along in the chain, and there's cameras and lighting at fixed positions, and by a computer-controlled unit that's all automated, it takes some images. So these are some images that are taken. These images are calibrated. You've got a 2D image, which is the one on the left, and a 3D image, which is on the right. And those images can be used to mechanically grade carcasses, whereas before somebody had to be there to grade them manually. And we can get the Europe fat and conformation grade. But we also get the primal yields, which is some additional information. So the good thing about VIA is that it's in the abattoir chain, so it moves at the line speed, so it's quite fast. The position is triggered by sensors, so that's when we know when to take the images. And all we need to tell it is the carcass weight, the sex, and the ID of the animal. And then we get out of it a lot of information about the classification of that animal and the estimates of the primal yields. What we're going to get from the ABP VIA system is 9 traits, and they're all there in the hindquarter mostly, but a range of the primal cuts. And ABP are rolling this out to all plants. It's currently in 1 plant with plans to go for more plants soon. So VIA is a selection tool. There's been a lot of research, especially here in Ireland by Thierry, and he's found that VIA is a good predictor of the carcass cuts. And not only that, is that the VIA carcass cuts are heritable with genetic selection, so we can use them to select animals. So moving on to how our project is going to work. ABP will be collecting the VIA information of all the animals processed by them. So that'll get our phenotypes. To get our genotypes, the British Limousin Cattle Society will be genotyping the animals in the project. And then once we have our SNP key and it's rolled out to industry, industry will DNA test the animals. All this is possible because of the British Cattle Movement Service. We've heard it's very similar to what is AIM over here in Ireland. And every animal in the UK since the late 1990s have had to be recorded in that database. So by that database, we're able to make the link between the pedigrees, the phenotypes, and the genotypes. So this is a scheme of how the project, all these different data sources are going to work. And I'll just start with the BCMS database. We've just received an extract, and in that there's 48 million animals, so it's quite a large database. In that database, there's a little over 1 million pedigree animals, and Limousin pedigree animals, sorry, and just over 9 million Limousin cross animals, so there's quite a lot of animals. In that database, it's compulsory to record the dam and the date of birth, and it's not compulsory at this stage to record sire, although it's beneficial to do, and I'll talk more about that in a moment. What we'll do is we'll take the ABP data from, that's the next one, sorry, the ABP data with the phenotypes, and we'll match it up to the BCMS database. And using that, we can then get the extra information about those animals, where they were born. We also get the movement information, so in a lot of cases we have every movement from birth to the abattoir. And we'll combine all those sources into a single data set, which will then produce deregressed VIA EBVs. And it'll be those that we use as the phenotypes to produce the SNP key to go along with the genotypes from the Limousin sires. So talking in a little bit more detail, we're just in the last week have got some data, so this is hot off the press and still got lots to do on it. But ABP have provided us data, carcass data from one site, the site that has the VIA in it, since 2008. And looking at that, that's 65,000 animals annually that go through that plant. In the BCMS data, we joined that up, and we were very happy that we had a 99.9% match rate from the whole of the data since 2008. There was only 327 animals that we couldn't find in the BCMS database, so we were very pleased with that matching rate. Looking at that, once we've matched it up, of the matched records, 23.5% had sire recorded in BCMS, so that's then giving us 15,600 carcass records with sire recorded. When I looked at the ABP carcass data, I could see that 1/3 of that carcass data was from Limousin or Limousin cross animals. So if I put those numbers Limousin specific, we're going to end up with 5,200 animals, with Limousin animals with sire recorded each year. And if you compare that back to the numbers I showed at the beginning of the talk, when we were only getting 1,500 a year, with the ultrasound traits, we're going to rapidly get a lot of information very quickly on the carcass traits. And at this point, I guess it's worthy to say that if ever you're in a position, please encourage the farmers to record sire on the BCMS database, because it's invaluable and can help us tap into a lot more information. So that's the data merging system. We're still at the early days of forming the data sets and analysing it properly, because we've only had it for a week. If I move on now to the genotyping side of the project, we've got SAC have got 720 Illumina high-density genotypes, and we chose them from influential Limousin males. In the course of the project, we hope to genotype 2,000 more Limousins. And then, of course, after the project, we hope that it'll be ongoing, the genotyping. We looked at hair samples for these 720 samples. The Limousin had a hair storage bank, so there was 14,000 Limousins with hair samples, so that's what we had to choose from. And we went through that and created a list based on how influential they were, and based on the performance recording, did they have accurate EBVs. So we come up with the list and we sent it away to get the hair extracted. And we didn't, and on this graph you can see here too that the animals, oh, I've hit a button. The animals, although there's some as early as 1980, most of the animals are from the late 1990s and early 2000s. But we were a bit disappointed with how many of them got hair samples coming back. So the blue lines on this graph are the animals that we had on our list. And the maroon one is the ones that we could actually get DNA extracted from. And we only had a 58% success rate, which was a bit disappointing. But when I looked into it, and the black dots show the proportion that we were able to get out of it. And so you can see that anything before 2000, we didn't have very good success rates. If you just considered after 2000, the success rate was up about 70%. So that's to do with the age of the hair sample and how it's been stored, and it's just degraded over time. So we hope to get a lot more genotypes and finish building our data sets to then develop the SNP key. And I'd just like to finish up this talk with a little bit on how this will fit into the industry once we're up and running. So we have here the supply chain, from the bull breeders to the suckler farms, all the way through to the abattoirs and the retailers. And at the moment, there's not much communication between them. The signals are not that great. So if this is us here over in the genetic evaluation service. And we'll be getting the carcass phenotypes that'll just be automated on a weekly basis. It'll just come through from ABP from all their abattoirs, and that'll just continue building our reference population. We'll have information from the BCMS database. We'll get that in regular dumps that we can then keep joining up and matching. And we have the Limousins, and they'll form a subsidiary company that'll be a genotyping service provider to the industry. So in the first place, they'll also provide their pedigree and their pedigree databases, which we can then get pedigree and fixed effects from. And they'll also liaise with bull breeders with nasal swabs and to help the genotyping process and the sample collection. These will then go to a genotyping service provider, who will then send the genotypes through to the genetic evaluation service. And we'll then provide back genomic breeding values to the breeders, but not just the breeders, but to all the chain, and especially to ABP. And the advantage of doing this is that they'll all be talking the same language. The VIA EBV will be the same. The bull breeders can select for it and then can see the progress that they've made by the results coming out of ABP. So this project has many benefits. It'll have accelerated genetic progress because we'll actually be able to select for animals at birth, because carcass traits at the moment, you actually have to wait until they've been slaughtered before you get a phenotype. By having the genotype, we can reduce the generation interval and make progress that way. And also the trait is the actual abattoir trait, so we can be more accurate rather than a proxy trait. Although we've done well with the proxy trait, it's much better to have the actual trait. But it's more than just about the genetic progress. This is also going to be a project that gives us a platform in the UK for future work in genomics and also in new technologies and traits. And it will place the UK genetic evaluations with the world leaders. So But I think what I'm most excited about as well is that the market signals, for the first time, the abattoir through the breeders will be talking about the same trait, and ABP can send those signals back and say, I want sires that have these EBVs, and provide lists, and the breeders can respond. And hopefully they'll also be able to be paid a premium for supplying that to help it send through. And obviously there's a large team of us involved in this project, so thank you for your attention.